Hello, everyone. Welcome to Momming and Thriving. Today, I have a special guest with us. Sharon is a senior marketing communications expert and the founder and host of Let's Talk DXP. With 14 years of media and communication experience, she's taken the Dubai media industry by storm. Our podcast is amazing. I've listened to it personally, and what I love about it the most is just our authentic stories and our authentic conversations. In our podcast, she shares our story, our personal journey, and the stories of others, all with the aim to inspire. She's a single mom on a mission to bring diversity to the media industry, and she wants to go beyond the glitz and the glam of Dubai. Sharon, welcome to Momming and Thriving podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Toyin. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me this afternoon.
With our podcast, we normally start with something called the gist of the week, where you share an experience, a mommy moment, or just a personal experience where you've learned from, or something that was funny, just as a way to start the podcast. So, is there anything that's happened to you recently that you'd like to share?
Yes. Well, being a mum, it's always exciting. I have an amazing 3-year-old boy who is so inquisitive. So the man of the house is always what I call him at such a young age. So this morning we were getting ready to go and do our usual activities, and he takes my car key and he's like, "Mummy, I'm driving the car." For some reason, he's been watching so much, he knows how to open the car door, and he's trying to let me into
Mm,
the passenger side. So he amuses me all the time because I'm overwhelmed by how much these children actually absorb and how much they learn so quick.
mm,
So that put a big smile on my face this
absolutely.
morning. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's been a good start to the weekend. I think when you start being able to spend time with your child on a Saturday morning, it's always a good
Yeah,
start.
when they do things that just shock you, like it shows their growth, it's just such a nice thing. I think what happened to me recently was I was cleaning up. It was nanny's day off. So I was cleaning and I was getting overwhelmed. I was thinking, my goodness, how does she do it every day? But anyway, it was one of those days off and I was just doing so many things. And my son asked, Mommy, can I help you sweep? And I I was just like, when did this happen? When did this transition happen from that? And it was obviously he didn't do it as good as I would, but it was
Yes.
everything. Just being
Yeah.
asked and not having to ask him. And oh no. So when they do those things that kind of like your son saying he wants to drive, it just makes you feel, oh, he's gonna take care of me, he's gonna look after me when he's
Yes.
older.
Oh yeah, it definitely you're just like, oh, okay, we're doing the right thing. He's caring, and it's so amazing. So yeah, hearing your story, I can definitely relate. Yeah, those moments make it all worthwhile.
Absolutely, absolutely. That wasn't my gist of the week, but my gist of the week, I think we kind of talked about it. So I had two trips this break. Went to Nigeria and with my three kids,
Yeah,
and then I went to Turkey with just myself and my husband. And
nice.
what I wanted to mention was the difference in the time it took us from arriving at the airport to getting to the gate. When I was with my kids, I think it took us about an hour from checking in, going on the queue, going to the washroom, solving some tantrums,
Yep.
separating fights because I've got two boys that are close in age, and sometimes we have those
Oh,
fights.
yes.
And it was so funny because we arrived at Sharjah. This was when we were going to Turkey, just me and my husband without the kids. We arrived in Sharjah, and from the time we got to the airport to it was 10 minutes. We couldn't believe it. It was so quick that I was looking around, waiting for something to happen. Like it's almost like you're scared, like, oh no, this is
Yep.
too good to be true. How is this so smooth? Like, because we didn't have to check in. It was just a 3-day journey, so we had a carry on.
Yep.
So no queues, no going to the washroom excessively, no fighting, no separating, nothing going through the smart gate. And wow, I thought, I could get used to this life.
The times before children, oh gosh, it makes a difference. Yeah, now you have to at least accommodate a good 2 hours on top just for anything. Toilet
Mm-hmm.
breaks, tantrums, I've
Absolutely.
lost something. Yeah, that second break was well deserved
Yes, it
then.
was. Yes, it was. All right, let's get into it. Sharon, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. What was your formative years like? And what would you say are the things that kind of formed you as a person?
Yeah, so well, background, West African background. So Ghanaian, originally from Ghana. Don't sound like I'm originally from Ghana, I know. So my parents actually moved to the UK, I would say probably their late 20s, and they kind of made that their home essentially. And then they had myself and my siblings. So I guess if I was
Hmm.
ticking a box, it would be British, Black British Ghanaian in the label that would be there. So yeah, very much grew up in the UK, grew up in a very small village, not very diverse at all. I think at the time we were the only Black family that were living in the village. So it was quite a different environment for us. And it stood out. I mean, it stood out that we were the only West African British family living there. So it was quite different. I had to adapt quite a lot in terms of, dealing with inquisitiveness about, our culture, our skin color. And quite quickly, my mum obviously taught us from an early age in terms of being comfortable with who we are and being very strong in
Mm.
terms of who we are and accepting it and not letting others impose their opinions. And that was at a very young age, to be honest. So that's always stayed with me. And I try to make sure that I enforce that. And even more so in my adulthood. And it's not easy because no one likes to be judged. And, you always want to try and fit in with the norm, particularly when you're working in
Hmm.
certain environments. But I think what I'm trying to do even more so in my adulthood, in this later stage of life, is definitely go back to what my parents have instilled in me in terms of being authentic and really embracing who I am, and not being fearful of what others will say in a respectful way. So yeah, I so very much grew up in a very small village, I would say, and then later on in life, through my studies, then went to the UK, not to the UK, to London, sorry, to do my
Hmm.
degree. So university, qualified, and then stayed and worked in the city. So that was a lot more diverse, which was fantastic. I came across a lot of different cultures, and that's something that I love about learning about different cultures, different environments. I think it's very important, to be accepting of different cultures that are around you. So that I really enjoyed.
Absolutely.
And then coming to Dubai, which is what, 200 nationalities. And I've been in Dubai for 10 years and I've learned so much from so many amazing people. My background
Mm.
is, like you said, it's marketing and communications. So within that role, I have to talk to a lot of people and I like to talk. So that's fine with me, but I get to learn from a lot of people and I get very inspired by a lot of people. So yeah, I
Mm.
feel like from a young age, it's definitely shaped me, being quite isolated in terms of nationality and wherever
Can
you
I
are,
ask what?
to
Sorry,
making
can I
sure
ask
that I
what
can.
village that was?
Oh, it was in Suffolk. So I grew up in Felixstowe, which I
Okay.
don't think many people
Okay.
would have heard of before. So yes, so it's a very small, well, now probably grown, but yeah, a very quiet village. One bus that runs every 30 minutes. Mainly the high street is mainly charity shops because it's more elderly people living there. So it was quite remote
Okay.
actually. Yeah, but I think that's probably taught me in regards to really trying to be confident in who you are and embrace who you are and not being fearful of judgment. And it's not an easy thing to do. I think I've gone in and
Hmm.
out through the years.
Definitely not an easy thing to do. I would say you working in London and being in a multicultural diversity, was that like a taster of what Dubai is going to be like? Because you said you moved to Dubai 10 years ago, and how has that journey been being British Ghanaian, now living in an Arab country?
Yes, yeah. To be honest, I think at the time I didn't realize how diverse Dubai was. I think I didn't really think about it in terms of like the amount of nationalities, and obviously it's grown over the 10 years, which is fantastic. I think coming here, actually, I think what I experienced is how much more awareness and emphasis there is in terms of where your roots are from. So people would look at me and
Mm.
say, you don't sound like a typical African, whatever they have in their mind for what a typical African would sound like.
Second.
So they didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand the dynamic of being a Black British, and how you fit into that kind of society in the UK, and the different types of labels. I always call them labels that you make, or boxes you might fit into. So that was quite
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I found myself educating a lot of people as to why I look like this but sound like this. And I think that the early stages in Dubai, there was definitely probably more to be done in terms of the different types of cultures and the different types of upbringing that people, especially
Mm.
expats come in here, have. But that's completely changed now. I think it is very diverse. I think I've probably learned more about different, like truly learnt about other people's cultures and religions
Mm.
from being in Dubai more than I would have done, living and working in London. So I think
Okay.
that's fantastic
Oh,
as well. Yeah,
I went to uni in London. So I moved to London about when I was 16. So A level uni and then worked. I've not had that experience you've had where I've lived outside in a smaller
right.
town or a village. So I think the diversity and the multicultural side of London is something I was very comfortable with. But then on the flip side, when I moved to UAE, I live in a small town in Ras Al Khaimah. So it's been a bit of
Oh, yes.
an
Yeah,
adjustment.
that's the other way then. Yes, correct.
It's
Yep.
the other way. It is the other way. So yeah, there's definitely an adjustment in terms of as you said, educating people, showing them a different side. That is diversity. There's different people from different parts of the world, and just people having that experience where they say, oh, you don't sound like a typical African. That
Yeah.
you get judged sometimes. You walk
Yes.
into a room, the first thing they see is color, which is
Yep.
and the first thing they see is gender. So there's
Yes.
gender, there's color, and then it's almost like you have to kind of navigate those hoops to kind of just, this is
Correct.
me, this is the skills I have to offer.
Yep.
So that's been a learning curve for me.
Yes, yeah. I think that will always be, I think depending on the environments you go into, the living conditions in terms of where you live, etc., you'll always come across
Mhm.
that. And there's always going to be people that maybe haven't come across someone with your profile and
Mhm.
re-educating them in regards to, your upbringing, your journey, your story. And I've gotten to be more comfortable with doing that actually. I think sometimes it's just people don't know, or they've never experienced someone that looks like me or sounds like me. Yeah, sometimes we
Mhm.
just have to accept that unfortunately that's how the world is.
So what would you say have been your highs and lows of living in away from home, away from parents and close friends in the UK?
I'll start with, I guess, lows. I think the challenges that most expats have, being away from family, it can be quite lonely here. You have to build your own village here and your own community, and a lot of that is from
Absolutely.
friendships. Yeah, and they're quite new friendships. At home, maybe you've grown up with someone since you were 5, and you've maintained those friendships. We're here in your adulthood, late 20s, early 30s, whatever age you come over, you're now having to rebuild those friendships in order to have your community. So I think, like many expats, probably missing family is probably and missing out on milestones. You can't travel home for everything.
Mm.
It's not
Yeah,
realistic
that's
when you
that's
have
the
to,
one.
yeah, when you have to work a full-time job and you're limited on how many
Mhm.
days you have off and costs even to fly back and forth. So yeah, you have to accept that you will miss out on some things, and vice versa. They're not here, so they will miss out on some things that you would like to celebrate. So I think that's always a challenge, but I mean, I've been here for 10 years, so I'm navigating that challenge, and I've got a good group of friends here. I've got my community, and my family are, they love coming to Dubai, fortunately, so I do get to see them enough.
Mm.
I think highs for me is, even now, I would say probably this year, and we'll go into probably more so why, but I think I'm really enjoying living here and embracing who I am and what I'm doing here, and just the amazing people that I'm getting to meet and the exposure that I'm getting with so many different people as well. I think Dubai is definitely a place where if you work hard and you really invest in yourself and building yourself, and you're focused on what you want to achieve, I think it's doable here. And I know I've had people come over, friends come over, and they feel like they've just come and reinvented themselves in a good way.
Mm.
There's not external voices where maybe you would have had at home, where people are telling you maybe not to do something. So yeah, I think it's a place where you can start and really, grow and develop and be what you want to be. And I think
I
that's exciting.
completely agree about reinventing yourself. Okay, I'm going to touch on the one you said about, milestones. And that hit hard because recently a few of my friends got married, and then
Mhm.
you start seeing pictures and videos on Instagram, and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
you wish
I'm
you
missing
can't
it.
travel,
Yes.
you're missing it, and it's like, oh, this they went to Venice and they went to this place, and I was like, okay, right, we have to work full time, we have to
Oh,
be responsible, and we have to. So
yeah.
yeah, that's been something I've been dealing with recently. But about reinventing yourself, I completely agree because I think I've shared this with you, where having that time away and just not having the external voices, as you said, where I decided to focus on writing and just
Mhm.
immerse myself in my gift. I don't think I would have had the time or the space to do that
Yeah.
if I was in the UK. So I think that's 100% I agree with you in that point in terms of people having the space to reinvent themselves in a new country. So completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes when you take yourself into a new environment, it also forces you to challenge yourself and really think about what am I here to do? What would I love to do now that I'm in a
Mm,
different place? Because I think moving away from your comfort zone in itself takes a lot of bravery. So why not make the most of it and really explore everything
a-
that you would like love to do somewhere else?
absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned your lows. You didn't say it, you
Mm,
didn't expand on it, but I know one of those lows, which is that
yes,
you're recently divorced. Could
yes.
you share your experience and what led to that point, that decision, and how has it been so far?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say I celebrated 10 years in Dubai just last month, July. And it has been 10 great years. I've been quite blessed to, be able to be here for 10 years and have the security and, at the time, family unit, friendship. So I don't take that lightly or for granted at all. But I guess life is life and life happens. So yes, unfortunately, last year's summer, or just before summer, I'd filed for divorce. It was a very quick divorce in the UAE. So my divorce, from time that I filed to when the judgment was passed, was a total of 6 weeks. So life kind of changed quite quickly for me.
Mhm.
From finding somewhere new to live, selling the property, buying a new car, making sure I've got the right child support because obviously I'm now a single mother living away. So I guess that goes back to the challenges of not having family around when you go through these life-changing moments. Um, and I was at the time I would have been married for 6 years, but with my previous husband for at least a total of 10 years. So, you've spent a big chunk of time with someone and that
Mhm.
gets stripped away. So literally a season of rebuilding. I would say this season is definitely a season of rebuilding and healing. My decision to file for divorce, although it happened very quickly, I think I'm a Christian, and obviously I took a lot of time to pray over it and really make sure that this was the right thing. And I think when there's children or a child involved, it makes it even harder because you have those voices of
Mhm.
you have to stay for your child. And for some people it works. I'm not, this was purely my decision. Some people they stay for whatever reason it is and they make it work. And I think that is a beautiful thing because staying when the marriage isn't what you expected or it's hard, that in itself is a challenge. So to overcome that, I think that is great. But for me, I just knew that it wasn't what I feel like my marriage wasn't what I intended it to be and probably what God had really desired for marriage. And I think for
Mhm.
me to be happy and healthy in order to raise my son, I needed to do what was right. I was very mindful of, we talked about it in the beginning, how much children absorb as much as you pretend that everything's good and you're smiling. And I was very mindful of that. So I never wanted my child to see me to cry in that season because I just didn't want him to
Mhm.
absorb, but they're so aware of things. And I think for me spiritually and the way that the situation sat with me, I knew that this was the right thing to do. So yes, that's kind of the biggest challenge that I faced in Dubai, actually, now navigating life as a single mum raising a 3-year-old and still having to work full time, and life has to still go on. It hasn't been
Mm.
the easiest, yeah, to be quite
No,
honest.
but if anyone wanted to hear more detail about Sharon's divorce story, go on the podcast, check it out.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Okay,
here.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I did do an episode in that. So yeah, there is an episode about divorced in Dubai, my reasons. There's a second episode about
Mhm.
getting divorced in 6 weeks because a lot of people like how most divorce maybe a year, um, depending on the situation. So that was quite unique actually in terms of how quickly that all transpired. Pros and cons to that, I think, as well, because you then have to quickly adapt to your new reality, and I think that that can be quite challenging as well. I did
Can you
quite
can you
fast,
touch on that
but I knew that.
actually, please, for my listeners, the 6 weeks and how that was able to happen within 6
Yes, yes. So I filed, I had a great team of lawyers. I've always worked within the legal industry, so I've been quite blessed to have a community actually of lawyers as friends or colleagues. So when I made the decision that I felt like, this marriage was over from my perspective, I was able to tap into my network. So I used
Mm-hmm.
my colleagues to support me there from Alta Mimi and Company, and they were fantastic. I always mention them
Mm-hmm.
when I'm asked about my story because I don't take lightly or for granted the support that they gave me during a really difficult time. So
Yeah.
they gave me all of the options, and one of the options, which was quite new, I think maybe a year or two now, there is a no fault option in the UAE. So essentially, you don't need to prove fault as to why you want to file for divorce, and the
Okay.
grounds are there. The husband or wife can file for no fault divorce, and it will be considered in court and by the judge. And it shortens that process in terms of mediation process and
Okay.
depending on the cause of why you're filing. If you don't go down a no fault divorce, sometimes you need to supply evidence. So that is a very lengthier process. So I wanted to do something that wouldn't require a lot of that. And also I'm mindful of the costs that can be associated
Mm.
to, doing this. And I needed to be sensible about where how much money I spend on something like this. I have a son to raise, I have school fees to pay, I have livelihood. So for me that option made sense. So yeah, there is a no fault divorce option, which is a quicker option, because you don't need to prove fault when you want to apply. Now obviously everyone's story and the matter is case by case, but for me it just so happened that everything came together in a total of like 6 weeks and 1 day, I believe, from the time that we actually filed for the divorce.
Can I ask what led to, at what point was this like, this is it, and you knew you weren't going to, what was the thing that kind of tipped things over and made you decide that, okay, this is it for the next years of my life, next chapter, I'm not deciding to carry on with this marriage?
Yeah, so for me, unfortunately, in the marriage there was infidelity, and I know, and I've done an episode with Madeline Mendy, so she's a partner and family lawyer, and an
Yeah.
amazing woman actually, and she actually helped me to give two sides when you think about infidelity and when that happens, either husband or wife. I mean, it can happen either sides, but I think for me, probably the trust was broken, and rebuilding that trust I felt would have been very hard. And the impact I think that had on me, I was finding it quite hard to know how to navigate and rebuild the marriage after something like this. But I do say in that episode, I'm a Christian and I'm for love and I'm for marriage, and forgiveness is very important. And I think repentance and being remorseful, it wasn't something that I felt that was there in my personal opinion. But for others, people do overcome infidelity, and I think that is a beautiful thing because it's not easy. It doesn't even need to be, kind of infidelity in marriage. It can be so many different dynamics that are a struggle to really kind of rebuild, but people do it, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that is beautiful. It's just my happy ending, and my story wasn't like that. And I think I had to be very true to myself in terms of
Absolutely.
what my non-negotiable is in a marriage, and who I
Mm.
am, and what I expect from my husband. And unfortunately it just was something that I couldn't kind of see past. So I'm working through kind of that as well, because I think it's yeah, it's something that I need to also work on in terms of my healing and understanding, to be able
Absolutely.
to move on.
You mentioned non-negotiable, and this is something I've been reading about recently, or just kind of listening to podcasts and listening to information of women out there, especially late 30s, 40s. There's been it's almost like there's a shift in terms
Mm,
of the things we expect from our relationship and from our partners. And I think it's more like maybe in your 20s, you don't really know what are those core
yeah.
values for you as a person. And for a lot of us that got married in our 20s or got married earlier on, we're still on the journey of discovering ourselves. And then
Yes.
you find the person you are in your 30s is totally different from
Totally
who you were in
different.
your 20s.
Yeah.
Totally
Yep.
different. There's a level of growth, there's a level of expectations that you want for yourself and that you expect from whoever you decide to spend your life with. So it almost seems like there is a surge in divorce, but it's not because it's made from a trivial perspective. It just
Mm,
comes from a place where a lot of women are beginning to realize certain things they want and how they want to spend the rest of their life, and certain
yes.
things that they're not prepared to compromise on. like you
Yes.
said,
Yeah.
non-negotiable. So,
Yeah, I think you're right as well, because obviously being with someone for 10 years, you evolve, the husbands, wives, you evolve, you learn, you adapt. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think, there's nothing wrong with that as well. I said recently, I was on a radio interview and I said, I'm 36, going to be 37. And I think I'm now truly discovering who I am. I go to therapy and I love that. But I never thought I'd sit here, and it's hard. It's hard unpicking and really learning yourself, and what your
mhm,
non-negotiables are, or what your boundaries are with friendships, with relationships, and setting those boundaries. I'm very
mhm,
much trying to now discover a lot of that for myself. And then yes, when you do
mhm,
get married a bit younger, you don't necessarily do that work, or you don't think about doing that work either, especially when things are good,
mhm,
everything's good. So I think that's right. And I know, speaking to Madeline, it's men and women. I think she brought to light, actually, we hear a lot about cheating husbands, cheating. It's also women. Infidelity happens on
oh
both
yeah,
sides.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah, it's very much the reality of that. And I don't take it lightly.
mhm,
And I've always said, I don't say this to shame or discredit anybody else, but
yeah,
it's my truth. And I think what I wasn't good at doing is speaking my truth and being authentic to,
mm,
this is actually what's happened in my life. And that was quite crippling for me. So I'm definitely feeling more empowered in regards to just owning it
mm,
and working through it, and trying to do it as respectfully as possible, because obviously I'm mindful that, there's another
yeah.
person involved. So I try not to,
Absolutely,
yeah, take that
absolutely.
for
You know,
granted.
I put my hands up for those that are listening to that. When she was saying you're 36 going on 37, I put my hands up because I'm 36 going on 37, and
Ah,
honestly, the 30s have just been real and freeing. You know, I was always thinking, oh, 30s we're getting older, but no,
no,
it's the other way around. It's the other way
yes,
around. I feel more empowered. I feel comfortable in my skin. I know my quirks and my not so glamorous
yes,
side. And you know what? It's
yep,
fine. It's like you're
just
suddenly just
owning
like,
it.
okay, this is owning it. This is me,
Yes,
and it's
yep.
totally fine.
It is actually so liberating. I saw friends yesterday for dinner, and obviously I isolated a lot during that divorce process. I think there was a lot of shame, embarrassment, like what has happened to my life.
Mhm.
Obviously, rebuilding as well. So a lot of people, they saw me in pockets, but yesterday they were just like, you just seem so much lighter. Not in weight,
Mhm.
because I definitely have been comfort eating, but just, I think, just mentally, and just being able to sit and smile and have a conversation. And I tried to
Mhm.
hide it a lot. I thought I did quite well, because that's my nature. Pretend everything's good and get up and go to work and put a smile on. But I think people can tell, when you're not 100% yourself, even if I wasn't telling them what was
Mhm.
happening in my home. But
Mm.
yeah, I feel that, there's an element of, so what, this is me and this is what's happened, and I just need
That's
to
it.
accept. And in that, I'm learning a lot more about myself, actually. And I think that is such a
Mm.
beautiful thing.
So, what steps did you take to overcome the process, divorce process? Because there's someone listening
Yeah.
to the podcast that's probably in the same situation and just
Mm.
wondering, you spent 10 years or more with this person. How do you begin to even start to find your new
It's
beginning?
I used to sit there and watch, like, YouTube videos or listen to podcasts. I'm like, oh, I hate all this stuff. And you're like, yeah, you just rebuild and all these loose words. And it's just like, how? How do you do it? It is so difficult. And it's still an ongoing journey for me. So as much as I'm saying, yes, I feel liberated and I'm going through therapy, I'm not there yet. And I feel for anyone that's having to experience this, men or women. When I launched Let's Talk, there were actually men that came and said, thank you for articulating it and actually, being vulnerable and being open, because it's a really hard
Mm,
process. And I think for me, actually, I don't have the formula. So I don't want your listeners to say, oh, she's got it together now, she's over it. I'm definitely not. But I think the first thing I did was therapy. I've never done therapy in my life. Coming from West African background, you don't
like
really
I
get,
said, I made that
you don't,
sound. I made that sound intentionally because that is so true. We need to
you
do
don't,
better. Come on, we
yeah,
need to do better as a community when it comes to therapy or talking about things that are not so fancy. You
yes,
know,
yeah,
without
we
shame as
don't.
well. We do it without shame. We need to do it without shame.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And my therapist helped me to navigate that, because she's like, you're carrying a lot of shame. You're not willing
Mm.
to say what's actually happening. So I think as soon as it happened, I did start therapy, because also I'm mindful, I'm a mother and I want to be able to raise my son, and I want to make sure that I'm the healthiest to be able to do that. And I'm giving him all of the time and attention he needs. So that's really helped
Mm.
me to uncover. I'm still very much going to therapy, and it just allows me a space to kind of talk about how I feel, good moments, not so good moments, and understanding what is happening in my life and how I'm navigating. So that's been very important. I think actually starting Let's Talk, a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, how did you sit there and be so open and vulnerable? And actually the good thing about it, because like I said, I'm mindful that there's another person involved. A lot of people said respectfully as well. I'm definitely not here to kind of discredit anybody or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I needed to free myself and actually be quite honest about my new norm in Dubai after 10 years. So I'm learning to
Mm-hmm.
be quite authentic in a safe space. I'm not, because I'm not the most public person, which is a complete flip side in terms of me now doing this content creation. Before, you would never know anything about me. I would be putting on a good front, I think. So I think just owning it and learning to be authentic, and actually not being too bothered about what other people say. Yes, I'm always going to
Mm.
face judgy mothers in my child's school. It is what it is.
Really?
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that was a thing. I would have thought that moms would rally around you
There
with what
have
you're going
been,
through.
but I celebrated my son's graduation. Didn't know 3-year-olds graduate, but they did a graduation from his nursery. He's going to big school now, and I obviously I'm very mindful of people's situations. So I'm a go to
Mm-hmm.
all of the kids' activities that I can in the school. So a lot of the times the same faces would have seen me alone. And there are dads that don't live here, and they're very still much married, etc. But I would never question that, because you never know what's happening in someone's home. Yeah, so there was a
Yeah.
particular family that sat next to me, and I've seen them a few times, kids' birthday parties, and they were just like, "Oh, where's your
Mm-hmm.
son's dad?" I was like, "Oh gosh, here we go." Internally, like freaking out, thinking, "What do I say?" And literally, we're waiting for the kids to
Mm.
come on the stage, and I'm here by myself, and everyone's got their husbands pretty much. So I said, "Oh,
Mm.
he's not here. He doesn't live here." "Oh, are you guys still together?" I'm like, "Oh gosh, okay, here we go. Second question." I was like, "Unfortunately not." "Oh, is he an only child?" "Yep, he's an only child." "That's really sad." I'm like, "Thank you for telling me my life is sad as I sit here alone." And maybe it was out of innocence,
Hard.
but
It
it was
is
No.
really
that.
hard.
Yeah,
No. Come on. It's like
yeah.
courtesy, like
And
it's
she sat
out
right
of.
next to her husband, and her husband's also in the conversation. So I'm dealing with husband and wife posing all of these questions as
Oh.
I sit alone. So it's hard, and it's going to be a journey, and I have to accept that I may get those difficult times, or times where it just hits me in the gut, like, oh, this is a tough one. But also there's rewarding times.
Mm.
As soon as he came onto the stage and he's looking for me and he's screaming my name, you kind of put it into perspective that I'm doing my best and he's happy and he's healthy, and that's all that matters. So I think, yeah,
That's all
definitely
that
working
matters.
on, yeah, owning it as much as possible and as comfortable as you are, and just knowing that it's okay, it's okay. And it does get a bit lighter. I used to hate when people are like, "You'll be fine, it'll get better." I'm like, "Stop telling me that, because the pain is still too raw and it hurts." But
Mm.
it gets lighter day by day. I'm not saying instantly, but yeah, it starts to feel a bit lighter.
In one of my recent episodes, I talked about finding purpose within our pain. I don't know if you're a big reader, but there's this lady, Elizabeth Gilbert. I read a lot. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and which became a movie. I don't know if you saw the movie Eat,
Yes,
Pray,
I've
Love.
seen the movie. Okay, yes.
So Elizabeth Gilbert actually wrote the story. It was a true story based on her life, and she wrote Eat, Pray, Love after she got divorced and
Mm,
had to go on this spiritual journey to India and then
yes.
Bali and where she met. So it's actually based on a life. And she was talking about pain and how, obviously there's discomfort and there's the achy part of pain,
Mm,
but not for us not to waste the pain, to
mm,
find purpose within the pain. And from everything you've said so far, it seems like you've actually immersed yourself and you've done this thing which is totally out of your comfort zone, because you've
yes.
mentioned you're
Oh,
someone that's more like an introvert. You're going through, it stays behind closed doors. They're not
yes.
someone that would normally share that. So, how are you able to pull yourself out of that pain and find purpose by starting the podcast?
Do you know what, actually? And again, like, I don't say this lightly because I used to sit there and like, oh, pain out of purpose. I'm crying at 3 a.m. What does that mean? It just like it all just felt like, oh, fairy tale, all wishy-washy. And I think for me, because this felt to me so absurd, like I just could not understand that this was my reality. Like it didn't make sense. And I was internalizing and screaming inside. And I think just
Mm,
through all of that frustration and build up, I was like, I'm just going to talk about it, and that it just freed me. It was definitely Let's Talk DXP started for my own personal healing. I recorded
mm,
that first episode and I think I sat on it for about 4 or 5 months because I was like, I'm definitely not going to share this. No, no. I talked
mm,
myself out of it daily. I was like, I've done it, but I'm not sharing it. Nobody cares. I'm going to be embarrassed. All of the things you tell yourself. But then I was just
mhm,
like, there must be so many people going through whatever, not even just like similar situation to me, but a lot in Dubai, around the world. Obviously, it's not Dubai problems. I need to make that clear. But I think when you're an expat and your community or your support system are not here, and especially if you don't have any at all, it becomes very lonely. And I think when you start internalizing
mm,
your thoughts, it becomes quite dangerous because you start telling
mm,
yourself things that a lot of people probably wouldn't react in that way, or they probably would care if you gave them a chance to know what was happening. So I think a lot of mine was literally just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to challenge myself. And it just freed me. It was purely for my own kind of selfish reasons, but then equally knowing that there's probably a lot of people there as well. They're going out for brunches, ladies' nights, meeting friends. But what's happening in their home and what they're experiencing, they may feel too embarrassed or no one else is facing it. So I just wanted to give
mm,
light that, we're normal people working hard in Dubai and doing life, and life happens.
mhm,
And let's talk about it. Let's build a community to talk about, the great people that are here working hard or experiencing challenges or succeeding, because everyone loves a happy ending. Mine was not a happy ending, and it's not always a happy ending in life, but I think it gives hope when people overcome. And so that's what's encouraged me to start this community. And it's definitely pain um, driven, that has led me to finding a purpose for myself. I wasn't doing much. I still don't do much on my weekends. So taking my Saturday afternoon and finding joy in meeting someone and having a conversation, that was enough for me to just get that glimpse of hope and happiness, which I had lost for a long time. And it still comes in waves. So a lot of it was just for me to, find a healthy distraction and do something that I enjoy. And I'm just so grateful to
mhm.
God that it's allowed other people to be like, oh, thank you for talking about that. Or thank you for shedding
Absolutely.
light. Yeah, that's been
Mhm.
a blessing.
This is how you know you've made the right decision. Your legs are shaking, your heart is beating. You're probably about to post the episode. You're thinking,
Oh,
ah, but
yes.
you know what? Well, you know what? When you see, and that was obviously how we met because I saw it, and straight away, I think there's a saying that says like when you work in purpose, those that align to you kind of gravitate towards whatever
Oh,
it is
yeah,
you're doing. But if
yes,
you don't step out in faith and do it, post that video,
yep,
share that story, they
yep.
would never know because
No one.
you've
Yes.
not done that. So yeah, I can empathize, I can understand because it's something
Yeah.
that a lot of women and even men as well are going
Mm,
through where, you're surrounded by glitz and glam, you're surrounded by the highlights of people's life
yes.
on Instagram, you're surrounded by just everyone else's life seems perfect, which is far
Yes.
from the truth because there's not a lot of safe spaces where people can have authentic and
Mm,
real
mhm.
conversations about what life is, which is not always smooth sailing. And as you
Correct.
said, it's not always a happy ending in every single aspect. I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine. She's a medical doctor in the UK, and
Mhm.
I could never tell because she never shared this for a long time. But our son had our son is autistic, and just
Okay.
having a child with special needs, it's tough, and being
Yeah.
in a demanding career as well. And it's through the podcast and for her sharing her story that other moms were able to reach out to her as well and say, "Huh,
Fantastic.
finally." So I think definitely we need more spaces where people have conversations that are not about the glitz and glam alone.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't take it for granted. I mean, anyone that comes in to speak to me, I always pray before that God protects the conversation and protects them, because I think when you do
Mhm.
open yourself up, obviously there's judgment, there's comments, there's opinions, and how do you kind of navigate
Mhm.
that? So I think it's very important I'm very grateful for anyone that is willing to kind of share openly in regards to
Mm-hmm.
their journey, their experiences, because it's a terrifying thing to do. Like I felt it firsthand. I was literally shaking and wanted to hide away because I was like, what have I done? And I know family members that know me very well, like, you're such a private person. Are you okay? Like they just felt it was so out of character. But I definitely felt that God
Yeah.
put it on my heart. You know, I constantly, he was like, open your mouth, open your mouth. And I said, if we're doing this, God, I need you to protect me in this because it's a
Mm.
scary thing. But it's helped me to build a community of others and, people even just encouraging me through, a difficult time.
My last question would be about for a mom. So imagine there's a mom right now that's going
Mm,
through what you went through, probably maybe in a turbulent marriage, maybe in a toxic marriage, and
mm.
just doesn't have the strength, she doesn't feel she can muster the courage to find a solution. What advice would you give her? What would you suggest?
Oh, it's a hard one. And I think for me, I didn't really vocalize what my decision was until
Mm-hmm.
quite later on. So a lot of people were quite surprised. What I did take time out was to pray because I am a Christian. And I think either way, I
Okay.
think you need to tap into
The spiritual.
all scenarios, like, can I live with this, whether it's staying or leaving? What would that look like in terms? Because I really had to put myself in, what does my life look like as a single mum? Obviously, I've never been a single mum. I did,
Mm.
my desire for having a family and two parents in the home and all of that was very much what drove me to have a child because, I didn't want to do that alone. So I think you really need to kind of look at all aspects of staying and leaving because either side is very hard, and I think really be true to yourself. I made a decision, and what some people would say very quickly, but it actually wasn't. If I was really true to myself, I probably knew for quite some time that this is not the marriage that I would want to be in, and I didn't know if I had the strength, if I'm quite honest, to be able to rebuild that marriage. I needed to remove myself, and it was literally, it sounds weird, but everything in me was telling me that this was the journey that I was going to take, and it hasn't been an easy one, and I'm definitely not here to encourage people to get divorced or leave their marriage. But I think either way, if you can work on your marriage and you can put the energy that way, fantastic. But I think sometimes as well, take out external noises because I think external voices will make either decision quite hard, and sit with
Mm.
what you think this would be and take your time with it to really understand the gravitas of what it is. And I think female intuition is powerful. I've always kind of downplayed my intuition, but it is powerful. I think that mixed with faith and, from my religious standpoint, yeah, there's things that I can't explain what has gotten me to this point and what has gotten me to be strong enough to do this. So, yeah, I think definitely kind of sit alone, sit with it, and really think about, you know, whatever it takes to do whichever side, stay, leave, navigate it. Because either side is not easy. I don't sit here and say it lightly about, removing myself from my marriage and now being a single mother. It's not what I wanted and it's not an easy journey, but I'm just grateful for God each day that He's given me the strength to navigate.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So tell us more about Let's Talk DXD and what other projects you're
Yes.
working on.
Yeah, this always brings a massive smile on my face because I am loving it. I am loving meeting people and talking to people and creating this type of content. So Let's Talk DXB is very much real conversations by real people. And it's that straightforward. I think, like we talked about, Dubai is a great place, but there can be a lot of pretense. There's a lot of shininess. There's a lot of people feeling like they need to leave their house and put on a front. But let's just talk about doing life in Dubai. I started from a very vulnerable space, and through that, others have told me about how they've succeeded in doing great things, or how they're even still in a challenge, but how they're navigating that. I've had episodes with a single dad. I've never met a single dad before. That wasn't part of my community, and how he is raising a fantastic 4-year-old as a single father and has adapted his career. A conversation with a good friend of mine of how she battled cancer here in Dubai. She didn't go back to the UK, which is home for her, and how she overcame all of those hurdles whilst working, was, trying to navigate a really difficult time. And it actually brought to light, we've known each other for at least about 8, 9 years, but there was a lot of questions during her cancer period that I didn't even ask, and a lot of things I didn't know. So I was so grateful
Mm.
for her to share that. Before we came on and actually recorded, I was telling about a young gentleman who came to Dubai, very ambitious, but found himself in really difficult living conditions and had to manifest and wake up every day and not give up, to now he's doing amazing things. Like, you wouldn't think that story was his story. Madeline Mendy, who is a partner and a family lawyer, talking about both sides of infidelity and cheating. We also did an episode on kind of diversity and race within the legal industry, which is the industry I've been in for many, many years. But it's not as diverse as it could be. But how do you stand up and be your authentic self and be true to yourself and succeed in that type of industry?
Mm.
So there's so many topics. There's so many topics. I'm really enjoying building this community. I'm enjoying speaking to people like you, Toyin, and learning about your story. So I'm really grateful that God laid it on my heart to do something like this. And I just pray that He just helps me to grow it and it becomes even more kind of visible, so others can really learn and understand about different topics as well. So yeah, I'm having a great time doing it.
Thank you for sharing spending your time with us today, and thank you for sharing your story. We normally conclude our episodes by answering this question. So the first one is, being a mom has done what for you?
Being a mum has helped me to survive. Literally, like, I know it sounds cliche and, particularly during the season of divorce, it's very easy to just want to just lay in bed, not want to have to do Monday mornings, not want to have to do much. And I don't take for granted how God has blessed me with this particular child. He is so in tune with me. He has helped me to want to get up every day and keep
Mm.
on going for him. And I know a lot of people say that you fight and you push through for your children, and I felt it firsthand. Even the days where I'm like, it's Monday morning and I can't believe this has happened and I haven't slept much. His room is in the up the corridor, and every morning we keep our doors open. That's just my thing. So we sleep. He sleeps in a separate room. I sleep in a separate room. But he's like, he's my alarm clock. Mummy, are you there? It's morning. It's time to get up. And that just helped me to get up. So it's
Mm.
helped me to survive. It's taught me patience. I think a lot of parents can say
Oh.
that as well. It's definitely taught me patience, but it's also just shown me like how precious life is. Like seeing someone
Mm.
grow and absorb and learn. It blows me away every day when I look at him. I'm just like, it's just amazing. So yeah, that's one of the things I would say.
When do you feel happiest?
Oh, again, it's around my son. When I'm driving him or dropping him off to nursery or school and we have our morning chats. Some people are like, the chats that you have, we have our morning chats and we learn something new or we sing in the car. It just makes me so happy. It just makes me so happy how much time, like unlimited time, single mom working full time. It's very hard to get these moments, but I'm very intentional to make sure that I really invest time and speak to my son and hear from him. And I think actually doing Let's Talk is actually, I can say it's been a year of not feeling so great or so happy. Anytime I come into the studio and have finished a conversation, I'm beaming. So yeah, I feel like that's probably when I'm at my happiest as well.
If you could tell 5-year-old Sharon something, what would you tell her?
Oh my goodness, we don't have enough time because I can't believe 5-year-old Sharon is now here, that this is my story. I would tell her that it will be okay. I'm not there yet, but
Mm.
I have hope that it will be okay. And life is not a straight road. I've always kind of been
Mm.
very tick box and I need to do this. And I think it's good to plan and be organized. But when it doesn't go to plan, I find it quite hard to navigate. And I'm definitely in a season of just knowing life is not a straight line and the circles or the waves are all part of life, and to normalize that a bit, to know it's okay. It's okay.
Now that's advices for everyone. Life is
Yeah.
not a straight road. The circle and the wave is part of the journey.
Yep.
Absolutely
Yeah.
part of the journey.
As hard as they may be. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us. Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much for
having
being with us
me. I'm
today.
so grateful. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.